Alle heil en eer aan u. Good evening. As you've heard, we're supposed to speak about being brave, bold, and ambitious. Words that I don't think I actually ever used for myself, but this gave me an opportunity to think about that. But before I go any further, I thought we can have some images, but we will probably just wait and see what happens. Before we go any further, today is the 9th of August, South African Women's Day, in which we commemorate and celebrate what women have been doing in order to contribute to democracy that we have today. Of course, there's still challenges. So do we have an image? Oh, that's me and my sister and I, Salome. And yes, I don't think I'm so brave and bold and ambitious. But I'm going to speak about other women whom I think are very brave and bold and ambitious. And I'm going to go to 1890. For those of you not acquainted with South Africa, we had the pass system. Now, to have a pass means you are a prisoner in your own country. You cannot move anywhere unless in your pass it says you are allowed to go to Getrude. If you are in some other place, you get arrested. So millions have been arrested. The British actually introduced it, and they introduced it for men only. They had black Africans as cheap labor for the numerous mines. But in 1890, they decided they wanted to curtail the movement of women. So they began to extend it to women as well. But of course, women didn't like that. And they decided, and they protested vehemently against it and said, no, we cannot have passes. You get arrested willy-nilly, and what will happen to our children? And also, police can also sexually harass us, so we don't want passes. The first recorded organization that actually protested was in 1912. And even though we were the segregated apartheid government and state, the Native and Coloured Women's Association from a little town called Winburg in South Africa, that is in the center in Bloemfontein, near Bloemfontein, they went all 600-700 kilometers to Cape Town to the white parliament to say, we as women do not want passes. There were also different organizations. One of the organizations that also was fighting for democracy and enfranchisement was the African People's Organization, the APO. They actually were very proud of the women, but they were a little bit peeved that the women did not ask them permission or consult with them before they went to Parliament. And they actually said in their newsletter, if any men had to go to Parliament, they would have consulted us first. But of course, as women, they were determined. So that was the first organization. Also in 1912, the African National Congress was formed precisely to promote the struggle for enfranchisement. But women could not be members. 1912, women could not be members. So a woman called Charlotte Mtheka decided, oh no, women are political animals, so we will also start the Bantu Women's League. So she started in 1912 the Bantu Women's League. And these were also the struggles of women throughout our history. And that's a picture of Charlotte Mtheka. But all the time we had these protests of women against passes. I'm going to jump to the 1950s, where we had the Federation of South African Women, and that consisted of the African National Congress Women's League. So that's, in South Africa, everything is usually, in terms of race in that time. So we have African National Congress Women. We had the Coloured People's Congress. We had the South African Indian Congress. And we had the Congress of Democrats, the whites. And they all came together. They wanted to focus on what affected the most women, and that is black African women, no to passes, pansy passes, as we would say. They then decided to have a national protest where women would come from all parts of the country to go to the union buildings in Pretoria. That's where the white executive was. They hired buses, train coaches, all sorts of means to get to Pretoria. When the apartheid government heard this, they banned all buses, trains, cars, whatever women had booked. Now I want you to contextualize. 1956, no cell phones, no fax machines, no email, no internet, and yet on the 9th of August, 1956, 20,000 women arrived at the Union buildings. I think we have some images. There we have the images of women. And the president that time was Stratham. And the women had all the petitions that they were going to give to Stratham to say we don't want passes. But of course this white gentleman as a president would not come down to meet the women. And what they then did is they sang a song. Wena Stratham, watintabafazi, watintabukontu, uzakufa. Watintabafazi, watintabukontu, uzakufa. And that is, Stratham, you have touched the women, you have touched a rock, you will be crushed. And Cheryl Walker in her book on resistance and women's resistance says in some of the research that not long after that Stratham actually passed away. But there we have on that picture, the earlier picture, we had women from the 4 different organizations going with these protests. Yeah, there we have someone from the African Indian Congress, the ANC, Helen Joseph, who is from the Cape Congress of Democrats, and Sophie from the Coloured People's Congress. And Helen Joseph, when she spoke to us in 1986, said it was a sea of green and black, all these women sitting, all these women protesting. Even the nannies had their white babies on their backs, and they actually had the silence, and before they actually then gave the protests. Protests continued. Hundreds and thousands of women were being arrested. But in 1959, the apartheid government hit women hardest. Because of the limited professions available to women in South Africa, they became teachers, they became nurses, they were domestic workers, and they were nannies. So, you could not go to a teacher's college without a pass. You could not become a nurse. You couldn't, if you were working in someone's house, you could not go unless you have a pass. And so in 1959, after 1890, all those years, they eventually gave women the passes. And yes, thousands of women, probably millions, were actually arrested. But la luta continua, the struggle continues. In 1990, we were still organizing, and I think we just want to say that Nelson Mandela was freed in 1990, and also the ANC, where we were part of the organization. I and 13 others were actually released from prison. We had a charge of treason. So that is the role of women that actually were so, the role was so key in this new South Africa, but also the Constitution. 1992, we have the actual discussion. There's the ANC with the sea of green and black, and then we have the Constitution writing. But who was writing the new Constitution for the new South Africa? You guessed it, men. And we as women decided we cannot be part of such a process. So we as the ANC Women's League made strategic alliances with the National Party women, you know, the Apartheid Party, the White Democrat Party, and we got all these women's organizations. We were about 2 million altogether, and we had the Women's Charter for Effective Equality. We've actually consulted women all over. Someone said, where did you find them? Wherever women were. The supermarkets, the shopping malls, the churches. We'd organize, for example, if I knew someone in a certain area, we'd actually give the details and we'd go there. Also, who would be the speaker? Which language do people speak in that? So would go. I would often speak to the church women because I was involved in church. And so we consulted 6 million women to draw up the Charter for Effective Equality, and that was used as a guideline for our new constitution. And in 1994 we had this new constitution, which was actually accepted in 1996. So those were the women's struggles. Now what about me in all this? Was I bold? Was I brave? Was I ambitious? I've never used those words for myself. And I recall the story my parents told me, because I also wanted to know what made me do the things I have done. What made me choose certain issues? Ambition? Boldness? Braveness? No, not a brave story. But those of you who've been to Cape Town, I've heard there were quite a few here who've been to Cape Town, people say it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and I think I do agree. One of the popular beaches pastimes is to go around the peninsula. And as my dad, I was about 4 years old, was driving up at Hout Bay, you look down on this beautiful beach called Noordhoek. And I said, oh, my favorite beach, let's go there. And everyone was quiet in the car. I said, oh, let's go there. And my dad said, no, we can't. And with all the indignity of a 4-year-old bravado, and why not? I want to go there, it's a very nice beach. My dad then explained to me about apartheid, that only certain people could go to certain places, and that only the best places were reserved for white people, who were the minority. It is 2013 this year. He also told me how in 1913 we had the Native Land Act, in which 87% of South Africa became white South Africa for the settler population, and 13% for the majority indigenous. And of course, you don't need much of an imagination to realize that that 13% had no gold mines, no diamond mines, no uranium mines, and there was this impoverishment of black people over the time. And my dad would explain all these things to me. And I said, but, as a impertinent little girl, but if they say you can't go to the beach, you just don't go? And he said, yes, you'll be arrested. I said, but what are you doing about it? What are you doing about it? And it was the law of the land, And I said, well, I'll tell you something. When I am big, I will do something about it. And that, I think, was what prompted me. So yes, that was my decision. I wanted to change this country. I wanted to get rid of all those boards. And then we were inspired. In 1976, we had the protest of the youth. And I never used the word bold for myself, but I did use it for my students. How bold they were in challenging the apartheid regime. How bold they were in the classroom when they didn't like something that I did, or, what they didn't understand. And I'd say, that's very brave of you. And I like the fact that we could actually dialogue about things. That's not my experience in Rwanda. Students don't really speak to you about issues, it's sort of behind your back. But that was how I used bold. I also feel that in many of these ways, I was part of the women's struggle. What was interesting about this, and maybe also a bit sad, was the political struggle was all-consuming. You didn't have a life. Everything was the struggle. One of the things I also noticed, unfortunately, was the fact that children of the activists, children of the leading, comrades, were being neglected. And then I made, I think, a sort of bold decision. I decided I will not have children as long as I am in the political struggle. As long as I can give them the attention that all children deserve. The barrage of the repercussions of this. You are not an African woman. You are not normal. You are unnatural. But I decided that that was my decision. I was not going to do something and neglect the children, because those children are our future. What other decisions have I made? I did my PhD when I was 53 years old. And everyone was astounded. Well, why are you doing your PhD in gender? You can get any job you want to. And I said, that was for me. I needed to do a PhD in gender. I needed to understand issues around theory. I needed to understand how things work and patriarchy works. So yes, that was for me. So this is my journey to work towards how I'm making things change. But of course, before that, as I said, I was a women's leader. I was part of a prison. I think the sad thing was that we were in solitary confinement. And I was in solitary confinement for 4.5 months. And that was the first time I used the word brave for myself. And the brave was, I was going to write this book. And the title of this book would be Behind Bars, Prison Memoirs, Not a Brave Story. And yeah, that was my life. I was in politics. I decided not to be there because it was too all-consuming. It was a party decision. But one of the good things was that once I was awaiting trial, I also, the apartheid regime allowed me to have my therapist. And she said, Gertrude, you're doing all these wonderful things for women. You are a woman. What are you doing for yourself? So this is what my journey is now. My journey is now how to balance, to move, to be working for the poor, working for the marginalized, working for social justice, but also putting the me back in all of this. The same thing about being in prison. I also decided that no other person will go into prison after me. We were 14. I was arrested the 14th. And yes, not that we were doing anything wrong, we were just wanting dignity. We wanted our human rights. So yes, that has been my journey in trying to get to me and me in all of this. So for my life decisions, as you can see, not so brave, not so bold, and ambitious in terms of how do I contribute in a small way without sacrificing myself to change, to social justice, to a society where girls and boys, women and men can realize their full potential. And yes, we work for the New South Africa. And again, in the South Africa, there are many challenges, but again, it's not going to be at the expense of moi. We need to work in such a way, so this is my message, that we need to balance. And I agree with Nelson Mandela, who said, to be free is not really just to cast off your chains, but to live in such a way that others' freedom will be respected and enhanced. And yes, that is my journey, and that is my story, to continue working for freedom, for equality, for justice, for peace in this world, but also a better world for all, including me. Thank you very much.